so are we. So you're going to see things that we're working on, things we've established, things we're changing, and potentially things that we're not going to do in the future. All right? The second piece is the ePBL aspect, and we do hope to integrate some of those things, but one of the biggest objectives that we have at the end will be for us to potentially connect with you guys and think a little bit about how to create an e-network for PBL. Thanks. So, in proper Republic Poly Institute fashion, we're going to give you a trigger question. This was, not now, a little later, but this is our trigger question that we're going to start with today. What is PBL and how can it impact education? This has been something that we have been going through for about 2 to 3 years now and trying to understand it. Not just what it is, but the impact it will have. Okay, so our objectives today will be to talk about the journey. We're going to bring awareness to what's called the facets. And I'm very pleased to say that our facets were very in line to Professor Cosmos' different facets she was talking today. She was talking about the types. It's alignment, very aligned to what we're going to be doing. We're going to present some examples, so all three of us as educators are going to present what we do in the classroom, and hopefully we can talk about that network. Cool. Oh, hashtags. This was...
We're all Twitter freaks.
Yes. Just so you know, my picture was up there a lot this morning. I was trying to see how many times I could get up there. They were posting in the presentation this morning. I was kind of embarrassed I didn't notice it was up there, so after about 4 posts. Okay, so we're going to start with the first step of the problem-solving method, which is inquiry, and then we're going to move through that process as we are experiencing it as an institution.
So what we've done as an institution, we as an entire school have been doing a lot of research and development about what do we need to have in place to really be a relevant school for the future. And we already have a level of excellence now for what we know is current reality for our kids, but how do we really make sure that, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, what we're providing is still relevant as the job place and the world changes. And one of the things that we came as we were doing our research was this concept of PBL, project-based learning. And for us to be able to really explore what it means in the context of Singapore American School, what we needed to do is really take a look at different models. So Dennis will end up sharing with you some of those models. And what we have allowed our faculty to do is within the constructs of the RPI model, within the constructs of Bucks Institute model, with what we know has come out of the work with John Hattie, we have some frameworks that we're allowing teachers to just jump in and to allow them to actually pursue a problem in the form of a class and just try it. And we've had a lot of success. The examples you're going to hear today are all from our high school, but we do have even down in our pre-kindergarten 4-year-old class where we're putting this into place. And so for the few of you who were at the lower levels, you can feel free to email me and I can set you up with a couple of examples of that.
Okay. So we had the inquiry, we had the question, and we had the drive to try to reach perfection, which brings us excellent. Now we started the analysis phase. And really, 2 of the major models that we have seen, we've been educated in, we as administrators have brought teachers in to be trained in, were through the Republic Poly Institute's model, which is very much so problem-based learning, and the Buck Institute of Education, which is also connected with the New Tech Network, if you know that from the United States. The Buck Institute of Education is 8 essentials of PBL. So these are the 2 major models after our research we've actually come to look at, believe that there's inherent value in them, and then to start educating ourselves and understanding better. On the left, you'll see the major components of RPI, which has a trigger. You create a trigger question and you make sure that the students understand what the objectives are for that learning. Then we have the key ideas and key concepts. This is a little different, I'll talk about in a minute, than the need to know that's here for Buck Institute. You then have scaffolding, which is what are you as an educator going to provide for the students for them to learn the material that they don't necessarily have the insight to put out there and learn themselves, or they may need that technical, professional, expert instruction that you need to provide. So you scaffold their journey even though you're allowing them to be more self-guided than a traditional classroom. Constructive questioning was huge for the RPI model. Constructive questioning is when students ask a question, you ask them a question back. You're allowing them to build their own understanding. You're not trying to ask questions that are yes, no, A, B, C, D, or very objective. Okay? And then holistic assessment, looking at both formative and summative. Now, the Buck Institute model is project-based learning. So where this might be a little bit more focused, tighter on a given problem, and there may be a solution. Project is much more open-ended. Okay, seems to be longer in duration. And so you would start with a driving question, which is more open-ended. We'll talk about that today. Then students from that will have to come up with their need to knows. What's interesting is this is not a teacher saying you need to know this. This is the students looking at the question and saying, this is what I need to know. Okay, so it's a bit of a different paradigm from traditional instruction. They also have an opportunity, what they're doing, to have voice and choice, and then jump into really in-depth inquiry. At the end, they do a lot of revision and reflection that leads to a public audience presentation. And when they say public, they mean outside of the walls of your institution. They believe that the public should not only be presented to, but should be part of the assessing model, meaning giving feedback and having the opportunity for the students to reflect. They said that's essential to create that authentic experience for our kids. So these are the two major models. Now, through our research, there's been actually a lot of models that we've come up with. So what I want you to do right now, every table has little yellow stick-em pads. What we'd like you to do is very briefly, on a yellow stick-em pad, write down different models beyond problem and project. What have you heard of? Okay? All right, just quickly, just one per yellow stick-em pad. All right, I might say all of them. Just organizing it. Okay. So this is just very briefly, other than problem-based or project-based, what are some other types of PBL that you've heard of? I'll give you a hint. Ms. Cosmo talked, or Professor Cosmo talked about it a little bit today. Remember, one per yellow sticker.
Are you sure? But the organizer, yeah. Okay, having a
This is very PBL because you guys are working together as a team, yes? Trying to write it down. It's an authentic problem because there's confusion at the beginning, whether it's how I explained it or maybe trying to come up with it.
It's right. Before you discuss.
We have some checking the internet. This is great. That's not cheating now. That's effective use of resources. That's all right. So we'll give you about 30 more seconds to collect your thoughts. Remember, try to put one per piece of paper.
I love pedagogy.
All right. So just write down your final kind of thoughts. It's okay. I see people looking around wondering, how many do we have? Does this other group have enough? No, it's okay. All right, you guys are good. We appreciate it. This is actually, I didn't know if this would be effective just because it's the challenge and the open-endedness of it. So let's see how it goes. Before I go, Jennifer's going to mention one thing about our research. So,
one other piece that we just want to put out there is we're going to be moving into the conversation is, I don't know if you're familiar with the work that's come out of New Zealand with John Hattie into really looking at the difference between problem-based learning and problem-solving teaching. And so this has also been very influential for us because, you know, as we see from the meta-analysis that Hattie did, problem-based learning, especially if it's just an accumulation of facts, can actually have a negative impact. If it's a more of a positive impact if it's the application of knowledge that's taking place. And so we're really wanting to make sure that whatever approach we're taking with PBL, that it's that application of knowledge, not just acquisition. And as we can see from his research, or his meta-analysis of the research, he didn't actually do the original research himself, but that problem-solving teaching, so really being explicit in problem-solving strategies, so that design thinking. And they'll be referring to that a lot. So really making sure that we're building in that component, which isn't necessarily always unpacked explicitly in some of the PBL models that we come across. So making sure that we put that on top of it.
okay, so let's see how you did. So the question was, what is PBL, problem-based learning, project-based learning, or ... Now, as we've said, we've worked with Buck Institute. This is one of their national faculty who wrote an article and did as much research as they could on all the different types. And so looking at your table and what you had, I imagine that there's hopefully some consistency, and I imagine there's also some examples that are not up here. I think I saw independent learning and some others that were not here. I do need to make one mention. If you go to this article, at the end, they also include zombie-based learning. I did not include that. That is not a joke. I guess it's because of the current Walking Dead shows or whatever, but they actually have that. I just thought that was too silly. Okay, so what we want you to do in a minute is to see where you think your examples, or even you could use these if you want, where they fit. Because here's what we've inferred. Can you click the next one? What is PBL at SAS? Through all our research, what we've read, what we've seen, we have come up with 3 facets. And they're very much so in alignment, as I mentioned, as Professor Cosmos was talking today. There is a facet of PBL that's problem-based learning. Okay? And we're seeing that, we're seeing the effect, we're seeing that it's got very positive effect on learning, and we're seeing it in our school, and we're seeing success in it. There's also creative challenges. Creative challenges are challenges you give a student that has a very open-ended type of solution, yet it's within a context. So this is one example we do in our life science in 9th grade is we ask the kids, how would you cure cancer? There's no answer to that. But it's within a context. They'll need scaffolding to understand what is mitosis, what is meiosis, what is cancer, what are the different treatments that are out there. So this is something that's really unanswerable. But sometimes they may find an answer, and hopefully in that one we find it. But that's a creative challenge. And then there's invention. There's the completely open-ended, much more creative thinking process type of invention or project. So what we were going to have you, we didn't realize your group was going to be quite so big. We're going to have you go put it up on the board. But can you on your desk right now organize your yellow stickums into 4 categories? Either 1, if you think it is problem solving, put it under problem solving. 2, if you think it's under creative challenges, put under there. 3, if you think it is completely invention, put it there, or other. Okay? So if you could just organize them on your table. Later on, we're going to put them up on the back as we have time. Okay? This is good feedback for us too in our research.
Because they had so it just facing behind. Just hold the right one, pedagogy, yeah, so facing.
We use it in our senior project, so they're going to final project at the end, and then they have to go through. It's very much you can't get inside the shopping mall. So that's
Okay, so I see you organizing it. I see some of you writing them down and others. Just make sure you clearly identify which pile is which. Do not write on the desks, okay? So, I'm sorry. So just kind of put them there, and later we will grab them and put them up on the back, okay? What's that? Oh. One more minute.
Again, as Dennis said, we will have someone from the table go stick to them up in the back at the end when we have started the process. But what we wanted to do now is to actually, and because there's so many teachers in the room, hopefully you'll find this really useful, is give some really specific examples of each of the facets in action. And so we're going to start with Darlene, who's going to share with you problem solving.
So hi, I'm Darlene. I look young because I am young. There's nothing on here. And so I'm going to present to you what the problem solving that we do in mathematics look like. So before we do that, I'm going to ask you to take a post-it note if you still have a post-it note, or write anywhere that you can find, just like you said, not on the desk. If you want to write it on your hand, you can. If you need more paper, let me know. Just something to write on. We'll do an experiment, a quick experiment. Okay, are you ready? Let's see who's the fastest. If you need a pencil, let me know. I'm a math teacher. I usually have math pencils. Okay. I want you to draw something on. Whatever it is your inspiration. If you don't know, you can look around the room, draw something, anything. Okay, what if I tell you that what you have just drawn, we are going to turn them into a math art using algebraic functions and then also the TI Inspire. So this is the calculator that we use in the classroom. Every student has one. And what you're going to do is you're going to turn your picture or whatever it is that you have drawn into math art. As you can see right here, this is Pikachu from Pokemon. That's a student work, not my work. And she decided to draw Pikachu. Here's another example where Corey really likes his name. So he decides to do Corey in a TI Inspire calculator. As you can see right here, there are equations that are around it. And here's another example, Arushi drew a vase. Now, as I present that to you, what kind of questions do you have? If you still have a piece of paper that you can write on, think about the questions that you have with me just presenting that topic to you. Turn your art into math art. What kind of things come into your mind? Like, what do you need, what do you want to know from me? So if you have a question and you want to write it down, I think you should write it down and we'll share it out. So what questions do you have? And I'll give you 30 seconds. Now, I see that there's nobody sitting near the teacher's desk right here. So if you're sitting furthest away from me in your table, I want you to share what questions you have with your team. You're the furthest away. You're sitting furthest away from me. Go ahead.
Also use the calculator. I don't think I remember equations.
The second thing is how to adjust the spaces in between them.
Okay, in 10 seconds.
I'm going to whatever I
All right, if I can have your attention again. All right, let's share it out. So let's share our questions. Anybody's willing enough, brave enough to share your questions? Yes, and your name?
Joe.
Joe, hi Joe.
Hi. How much is the calculator?
How much is the calculator? Perfect. Good question. Very nice. Okay, any other questions? Let's go to that group in the back. One question. You just have to share one.
How do you use the calculator?
How do you use the calculator? All right, you cannot repeat anybody else's question, okay? Third question, third group.
How do you start to find the function for the curves?
How do you start to find functions for the curves? All right, next group.
Pretty much the same. We're asking how question, how do you turn your art into math?
How can you turn your art into math? Another one.
How do I adjust the spaces in between?
How do you adjust the spaces in between? As in like Pikachu's eyes, for example? Is that what you mean? Okay. Next one.
How is the picture related to the numbers?
How do the pictures relate to the numbers? Very good. Next one.
Again, how do you turn it and are there any examples?
Are there any examples? Okay. Another one. Any question?
Why is it important?
Why is it important? Of course, that's the first question that the students would ask. Absolutely. And the next one. What you can do with this. All right. So those are valid questions, and those are usually the questions that the students would ask, right? But the idea of what we just presented, why did I present it to you like that? This is actually how we present the project to the students. I first ask them to draw something, anything that they want, and then they're supposed to turn it into math art. So the idea is, usually in a math class, you would come into a classroom, or before I started doing problem-based, I would come into the classroom and say, hey guys, we're doing transformation of functions today. We're going to learn about parabola. And then I start with whatever lesson and whatever it might look like. And then you go through your day by day by day by day, and it looks like a piece of puzzle that you're trying to put together for the student, right? Like, oh, where does this day 5 go? It goes right here. How about this day 6? And then at the end, you go, all right, and now that we're done with all our lesson plans, and there's a culminating project. And usually we put that at the end. But now we're proposing, why if you do it the other way? You give them a unit project, and you say, what will fit around this unit project? What do you need to know? And then so you go through, oh, what is it that you need to know? Why is it important? All right, let's go through that in day 1, for example. Let's go through the next question in day 2. Day 3. Here's a checkpoint. I'll explain that in a moment. There's a day 4, day 5, day 6. And once again, You go through the whole thing, and then you close it up and say, bam, that's your unit project. Because you present it in the beginning, and then you close up with it. So what does a day-to-day look like, for example? This is where the problem starts. So we have a project-based in our math class, and then we do a problem-based every single day. So that would look like exploring, conjecturing, questioning, all the nice words that you do. But these things we teach explicitly. And why do we teach all these things explicitly inside our classroom in the daily structure? It's because we want them to create the habits of mathematicians, which include all of these things. Right? So the first question that you have, why is this important? Why is it important for you to know that? Well, because of the transformation of functions that you have. So in this case, with this example of math art and learning targets, I'll give you some paper for you to look at. The math art is, you can find in page 3 and 4. The parabola investigation is page 5 and 6. And then the next one, 7 and 8, other parent graphs. And then each day we close it up. So then the question that you guys were asking is, where do you even start? Well, then let's start with something that you already know, parabola investigation. Knowing that, as a math teacher, I have to go through the learning targets. I still have to go through all the standards that the US wants me to do. You have to know parabolas, you have to know hyperbolas, you have to know cubic functions, and all of those things. But the idea is that we close it up inside a project. Right? So the paper that you're getting right now, it's a copy of the slides, for page 1 and 2, and there are some examples of what that might look like. And once again, you close it up and you say to the students, wow guys, great job. That you did everything based on the notes that we did, on the questions that you asked, and this is what the day-to-day might look like. So day 1, we introduce a project. Day 2, day 2 you go, so how do you even start? And then I say, so what's a familiar function to you? They've already learned parabolas before in Algebra 1. So when they come into function statistics trigonometry, I say, remember that parabola that you learned last year? Let's start there. How do you transform those? And we do it based on notes. So we're still doing notes, just like any other math classes in the world. We still use notes. But at the same time, we structure it differently. And then perhaps day 3, we go, well, what else do you need to know? Is parabola enough? Will that be enough for you to draw Pikachu's eyes? You know? Or do you need something else? Or what about the nodes? But that's not a parabola. So what other functions are out there? So now, not only will they learn about all the functions, like I'm supposed to teach, because according to the math standards that I have to go through all those functions, but now they want to know, how can I make Pikachu's belly, for example? What kind of things are there? The non-functions. Well, are all things functions? Can I put that in the calculator? And I go, no, of course they're not. There are also non-functions, and those are the circles. But how do we put that in the calculator? How do we change that into functions in the calculator? And all throughout, you're teaching them how to use a calculator because they want to know how to use a calculator in order to create this math art. Now you're asking them to have something at the end, like a project, a goal, and then they say, well, I want to get there. Can you show me how? And then I ask, what do you want to know? And they say, well, I want to create Pikachu's belly. How do I do that? Well, what kind of function do you need? Right? So you're asking them questions. And my job as a teacher has now become more of a coach and as a facilitator. And of course, at the end, what Dennis has presented earlier is that you tell them, look, these are my students' examples that I can show. If there was a question like, can I show examples? Yes. This one is my special one right here because she took it above and beyond the standard. We did not teach ellipsis, like that wasn't part of the plan. We only taught circles. And then she figured out on her calculator, well, circles don't work well for me. I want my penguin to have an elongated circle. And then so I said, what would you like to call it? Well, it's an oval. And I said, cool. In math, it's actually called ellipse. Now, what do you need to know in order for you to create an ellipse? And then so she tried to play with the calculator to find that out. And me as a teacher, then I start asking questions in order for her to go in depth.